With the speakers taken care of, it's time to take the next piece out of the car, which is the radio. We need to get that out. We need to make sure we have the right kits, wiring harnesses, integration. We need to see if there's anything we need to bypass or what's going on there. Meet me inside and we'll pop that thing out. So according to pack-audio.com, which is the kit we're going to be using, we need an SBK927. The reason why that's important right now is because here are the instructions for getting the radio out. There's two companies that make kits out there. For the most part, you have Pack and you have Metra. If you would like a very detailed de-installation, you can head over to metraonline.com. They have like step-by-step drawn pictures, which is really nice. For this one, it's pretty straightforward. Lower and remove glove box, which I don't know why. Although he does have the glove box out for running power wire. All right, hold on. So we'll read through these real quick, get this dash disassembled. All right, start with your pry tool and gently remove this corner here until this whole piece pops off. Remove the harnesses for the air conditioner, the airbag, and now we have 6 screws that need to be removed. And after a little bit of push and pull, got all the harnesses unplugged from the radio. Big major holdup was the USB here. They put a bundle of tape in here, which shortened it up and made it really hard to get the radio out of the dash. Let's head over to the bench and we'll make sure that this kit fits right compared to the factory radio. Look closely at the factory radio. We can see it has 4 mounting locations, 2 on the side and 2 on the bottom back. We want to check our brackets and make sure they are copies of that, both left and right side. Now it does have this little extra piece right here. This is for attaching the pocket that we won't be using because we're doing a doubled in. So lining it up, these are definitely what we're looking for. Next is to check this to make sure it fits in the opening we have, back fitting it in there, and we're good. So this is the appropriate dash kit for this car. Get this built and the radial slid inside. Inside the kit, it does come with a bag of screws, which we'll need. There is 4 smaller, thinner screws. Those are the ones we'll need for this particular kit. When sliding the radio into the kit, this is the most important part of the installation for sure. You want to make sure that you get it all the way in, all the way centered, and looking the best that it can. Because in a lot of cases, this is the only thing that the customer is going to see is how this radio looks. And if it looks bad, then they're going to think the rest of the install is bad. Spend some time, make sure you get it nice and centered. Now this is a short chassis radio, as you can see here. And the really cool thing about that is it doesn't take up a lot of room in the dash. The one thing that kind of irritates me is how these panels stick out past the radio. No big deal, I get it, but it does bug me, so I do like to remove them. Now to do that, I simply use this guy right here. It's great for cutting up in. Make sure if you are gonna do it that you keep an eye on these. You don't wanna come in deep or anything like that, which is what makes this tool perfect, because you can just ride that little edge right there, and that removes those, and now I feel better about it. Now we didn't get a chance to talk about this particular radio because I just wanted to get it into the dash kit so that we could test it, make sure that everything looked good. And that is what it's going to look like in the dash. Let's take a brief moment and go over the radio that is going into this car. It is the Kenwood Exelon DMX 809S. A couple things about this, which I love about these boxes, like the Japanese love putting things on the side of the boxes. It is Maestro RR compatible, Sirius XM ready. It has HDMI capability. It's capacitive touch panel, short body, and if you're an Android guy, you can mirror. On the back, it even has more stuff to talk about. But the things we're most concerned with are this guy right here, which is the RCA pre-outs. It has 3 5-volt pre-outs, and then a bunch of other stuff like you can add cameras and all kinds of things to it. We did some work here on the back of the radio already, just because it's force of habit and the way I like to do things. But let's take a closer look at what we got going on. Up here in the top corner is where your HDMI is going to go. It is a micro HDMI, so you do need to get a special one to fit in there. Kenwood makes one that is automotive grade. I do recommend that. Your GPS antenna plugged in here. This does not have onboard GPS. The GPS antenna is simply to make Android Auto and Apple CarPlay function better, because a lot of the times you don't have the phone in a place where it can get good reception. Rear camera, video out, AV in. These 2 ports here are for the iData. Your reverse trigger is a hard wire on the back, Sirius XM capability, and then your 3 5-volt preamp outputs. You have rear on top, front in the middle, and sub on the bottom. Your one and only USB is this pigtail coming off, which I like to dress up the pigtail here and take all of the stuff that is just random pigtails with the exception of the antenna and zip tie it together just to make it more robust. This is your wireless mic, goes here. Your front camera can plug in right here. It is a 6.2-inch touchscreen, so that means it has the controls here on the side. Now we have that figured out. Let's take a look at the Maestro RR and how that is all going to integrate together. So for those of you that are new to smart harnesses, a brief overview of why we need them is that your car has more computer control than it's ever had before. And previously, when you bought a car, behind the radio was key or accessory, power, ground, and all the wires for the peripherals were all right there. That's no longer the case. Now it's like power, ground, speaker, and data. So a lot of the stuff is driven over the bus of the car. So we need a box capable of talking to the car just like the radio does and getting us that information. And that is our Maestro RR. Now the way Maestro does theirs is they have one box, this guy, and everything goes through that, and you buy harnesses like this guy that will allow us to convert this into a Subaru. Comes with all the necessary pieces needed. And how we tell this that it is part of this is we connect it to the computer and we flash the module. The first step to this is to go to their website, download the Maestro programming app, log in, create an account, super simple, click the connect button. It does come with the adapter to plug in. We have this snazzy one here that goes to USB-C. Flash by vehicle, year, make and model are going to be what they ask for first. They give you a nice picture of the steering wheel control, and you can zoom in to make sure that all the buttons match. Next is your radio information. For this, I recommend keeping your box handy because you're going to need the information here on this. Type in the make of the radio, then they want you to type in the serial number. You have to do this part. It's very important. If you haven't already gone to their website to see what parts you need, this is where it will tell you the parts that you need. In this case, the radio is the SU1, which is what all this stuff is. The SU2 is right here. This is the USB cable adapter. If you're going to install a radar detector, now it's going to ask you what factory pieces you are going to be retaining, how you'd like to set up your steering wheel controls. For the most part, they've taken care of that for you. Then once you get to this page, it's kind of an overview of everything that you've just done. Select flash, and while it's going through all this, it's flashing the module. What we're waiting for now is it to do that, so it'll pull up the instruction manual. Now, one of Fernando's biggest pet peeves about this is that it pulls up a whole file on Subaru. So we just scroll down to our corresponding car. 2015 Subaru WRX with Bluetooth. It gives us any instructions that are needed and then gives us this guy here, which is the diagram for installation. And anytime I'm doing this, no matter how many times I've done it, I always pull this up because, well, you never know. It's constantly updated. There might be something they changed, so I always check. In this case, in the box, with the RR, it comes with a bunch of cables. Two of them are what we're looking for, these two black guys right here. One is the data to data connection, and the other one is, we just call it their aux cable. The data to data has two 4-pin plugs, one on each end. I like to plug those in right away. And the other one has that aux looking end as well as a 3-pin plug on the other end. They both plug into the same side of the RR. The cool thing about this software is it does tell you the harnesses you don't need. That's all this stuff here on the bottom. And the harnesses you do need. So for example, we are going to need the OBD2 connection, and this is a special OBD2 connection. It has 2 connection points and this wire right here, which I'm going to go back and make sure that we don't have another version of this car where this might be needed. Alright, so both of these show no connection on this wire. So at this point I'm going to cap that wire off, a little piece of heat shrink on there. And then the wiring harnesses we don't need are all these guys right here. Just set those aside for right now. And then we have the main harness. This is not the amplified system, so we can cut off these RCAs. Part of the notes. Coming over here, we have this blue connection right here, which corresponds to that blue connection and says no connection. There is this white connection here that doesn't list on here, but it's all these little pieces over here we're not using, so we know that this is some form of remote turn on according to this, so we're not going to be using that. And then we have our 2 connections here, which are the red and black, correspond to our OBD2. So those will be needed still. And then the other end has all the cables that are going to plug into that. We still have all these wires that we need to connect up to the Kenwood radio harness, and those are nice because they both use standard wiring colors. And what I mean by that is we're not going to be using deck power, so all of these are going to go off to the amplifier. So I'm going to fold these out of the way, but you have white, gray, green, purple. White is driver's front, gray is passenger front, green is driver's rear, purple is passenger rear. Then we have all these other colors on here that are just so vibrant and fun, and we need these to match up to our Kenwood. So let's start on the Kenwood side, and we'll pull our speaker wires out of the way because we're not going to need them. Steering wheel controls, this does have them, but through iData it's done through the data connection. So on the Kenwood it has this light blue yellow wire. We're not going to need that, so we'll fold that over with our speaker wires. Next is a brown wire. Brown is a mute for the cell phone. There again, don't need that. It's kind of a throwback wire. We'll fold that over here with our speaker connections. And that leaves us with orange white, which is illumination. We're going to match that up to the orange white that's located on this harness. It has a blue white, which is the power remote turn on. Even though this doesn't have the amplified system, we are going to connect the blue white on this up also. It's just good practice to do. We'll create a T off of this to go off to our amplifier. We have black, which is ground, is going to match up to our ground wire here. We have red, which is accessory, which will match up to our red accessory wire on this. And we have yellow, which will match up to our yellow constant 12 volts on this harness. Now that leaves us with a couple of extra wires now that we've done that, and those wires are pink, which is vehicle speed sense. This particular radio doesn't need that because it's not wireless. If it was wireless, it would need the pink wire, which is VSS. So for that, we're just going to cap this wire off. Next is purple white. This is reverse. The reverse camera for this is located in the factory screen up top. However, there is a purple white wire on the back of the radio when we were looking at that, those wires that were coming off. So we will lengthen this and connect it to that. Even though the car isn't going to display the screen there, it's just one day he may want to add a camera, so another camera, a better camera. So we'll just connect that. The blue wire here is the amplifier turn on for the FM antenna. Some cars have this, some cars don't. This wire I always connect to my red accessory wire. That way when the car turns on, it turns on the amplified antenna. There is no way to turn it on and off with FM, so it just needs to be on and off with the car. And then we have the light green wire, which is an emergency brake output wire going off to the Kenwood. If you'd like to hook that up, there is next to the purple white wire on the back of the Kenwood is the light green wire that this can go to. So there are a couple wires on each that we are going to cap off and not use. The first thing I like to do with this harness is remove their existing tape. Now you don't have to do this step. This is entirely just me being a little crazy about how I like my harnesses to look. Spread out the wire here. When we take the tape off, we can see that one white clip that was coming off, as I said, is remote turn on. If you want to use this as your remote turn on output, go right ahead. Entirely up to you. I'm going to remove it and add some heat shrink back over the connection. Now we also have that blue clip not being used for anything. When modifying this harness and removing all the tape, I like to really work the harness and get all the corresponding wires and whatnot off by themselves so that they're not getting in the way of anything else. And with all of this spread out, we can start to manipulate the harness the way we want it to. The first place I'm going to start is over here on the power side. I'm going to use some exterior Tessa tape that gets that off to its own. The next step is to deal with these speaker wires here. What's more than likely going to happen is we're going to be using speed wire to come up into the dash to connect to those. It's a 9 conductor that has all these same colors in it. And for that, I'm going to add into this a remote turn-on wire so that we can make one bundle and there won't be any legs coming off going to something else. Drop it into the harness here and just add that in, cut that off. Remove our ends to add a little piece of shrink wrap to the end here so that my tape doesn't unravel and it just looks a little bit more finished. Because I went from the plug out, I don't have to worry about this end. This end isn't going to unravel because there's tape on top of it, whereas this end may. So that's what that shrink wrap will lock it into place. Next, we have our 2 data connections for the OBD. For those, I like to take those and give them a good 3 or 4 inches off of the main harness. It's easier to spot them. There's a lot going on in the dash, and if they're really tight in next to the harness, sometimes they get lost. From there, we'll get our bundles together here at the main harness and we'll add some tape into that, bringing everything up to this central point. And then we still have what I call the peripheral harness, which has all those extra wires on them that we need. Bring that into our center that we've just created. All the wires that we need to use should all be located here, coming off of this main pigtail. Bring this together. Try to leave about 3 inches. Cut them all equal length. Grab another piece of shrink wrap. I just have a bunch of scraps from previous job and I just keep them all in a little bin. Manhandle the harness just a little bit. Add a couple zip ties here towards the end. That'll be our speaker wires that'll go off to the amplifier. Then we have all our data connections over here. These will plug into this. Before we do that and finish that up, we have this end which is designed to match up with this. So that takes us to the Kenwood harness, and for that I remove all my little flags that Kenwood likes to put on there, and we stock these 22 gauge butt connectors, and those are for insulating the ends of all the wires that we're not going to use. The little 22 gauge butt connectors are super tiny, like that's all those on there. It's like 10 butt connectors, and they're nice and thin, and they keep this from shorting out in the dash if there's any metal or anything like that. Isolate these guys all to their own. I take one more little piece of shrink wrap, a little bit bigger, slide it over the end. And that just finishes it off. Again, keeps them nice and out of the way. Now we have the end that needs to go to this. We have some oddball sizes. Cut those all to the exact. On this side, we're not going to be using the pink wire because we don't have VSS. Do that same 22 gauge butt connector to it. Purple white wire on here is going to go to the back of the radio. Of course, it's too short to do that. So we'll add some purple wire to it. Solder it up, apply some shrink wrap. And now at this point, this is where things get a little exciting, so to speak. Not really. What we want to do is we just don't want this purple wire hanging out. We stock some really thin flexible tubing just for that. That on over the kind of finishes that end off. We need a quick disconnect because we don't want to solder to the back of the radio because we need to be able to get it on and off. So we have to use little bullet connectors, insulated male and female. This side here needs to be the female. It needs to be fully insulated because the power flow on this is coming to this point. Slide some purple over here so we know what this is. Point, we have almost the right amount of wiring. First thing we want to do is we have that blue with white remote wire for this, and then the blue that we ran for the speaker wire. Twist those guys together. That'll combine those 2 wires. Then we have the amplified antenna and the accessory wire. Strip those and twist those 2 together so that those are all joined. And that leaves us with yellow, black, and orange. And that's essentially now, even though there's 2 pairs twisted together, we'll count those as 1, and that leaves us with 5 wires, which match these 5 wires here. The blue, white, the black, the orange, the red, and the yellow. So we're just gonna match those colors up to here, solder those together. Before we do that, we wanna do one more thing, and that is to future-proof this harness a little bit. Because today, they're just doing this system, and they may decide they wanna add a new backup camera, or a front-facing camera, or a dash cam, or some lighting, or you know, whatever. I've cut 6 inches of yellow, black, red, and blue, and I'm going to attach those onto here. And what these are going to be is pigtails, so that when we're done with this harness and we've buttoned it all up and it's all taped up and looking sexy, that there is going to be these auxiliary wires here, so that if they want to add things, we don't need to dig back into our harness. And let me show what I mean by that. Is this right here. I have that red wire, black, yellow, and blue. And so now I can plug into these any extra things I need to, and I don't have to get back into this. Now the one last thing is I have this cool area here where I soldered up all my wires, and this is important. This is one of the key steps here. I could have easily, when I was taping this up, just kept going and covered all this up. However, the bad part of that was I might not remember where my solder points were. And so in case I do need to get back into this harness for whatever reason, I don't want to have to pull all this tape off. That would just be ridiculous. The only spot where that would have to happen, the only connections that were made, is right here at these solder points. For that, I'm going to change my tape and go to a different style. Could be color, could be anything, doesn't matter. Just so you have a break in the tape. Make sure when taping up over heat shrink that the heat shrink has properly cooled. You don't want soft heat shrink to poke through or do anything bad like that. I can easily look at this harness and I can see this is where my connections were made. Everything is wonderful. I don't have to tear this stuff up. It's time to plug in to the brain. The nice thing about this is that it is color coded or sized. There's nothing that is like, you can't put it in the wrong holes at all. A couple more zip ties just so this doesn't get all crazy looking. When putting your zip ties on, don't zip tie over where you put your soldering. Don't zip tie that bundle together. When cutting your zip ties, if you're doing a bunch of them, invest in some really nice flush cutters. Make sure everything is nice and loose. It's good to go. And this is how I prep my harness to go into the car.